Okay, this part of the lecture, we're going to start off by understanding how we can determine our client's readiness to change. And readiness to change essentially refers to how willing and prepared is a client to actually make the behavior change that they said they want to change. And it's important to just start off with saying, in order for us to really understand the material that we're about to go over, it's really important that you understand the different stages of the trans-theoretical model. So if right now you maybe didn't quite understand the different stages in the TTM, go ahead and go back, rewatch the lecture, look at your notes, and if you do have any further questions and really need some help with the trans-theoretical model, email me, we'll meet, and I can help you out with that. So it's important that you know that before moving forward. So again, once we know a behavior that our client wants to change, we also now need to kind of see, all right, well, how ready are they to actually make that change? And this decision almost always precedes their actual behavior change. So what I'm saying is, in order for them to actually engage in behavior change, we need to understand how ready they are to engage in that change so that we can effectively individualize a plan for our clients. And you can do this a number of ways. You can use open-ended questions and scaling. And here's an example of how you could do that. So it's always a good idea, like I said, to start with those open-ended questions so that you can invite them to share more detail about what the changes that they want to make. So for instance, if you were talking to a client about kind of their health, you might say, what concerns do you have about your recent diagnosis of diabetes? So rather than saying, are you concerned about your recent diagnosis of diabetes, which would be a closed-ended question, rather you're using an open-ended question that allows them to explore more and give you more detail. What concerns do you have about your recent diagnosis of diabetes? From there, you can then try asking how a client feels about changing. Right? So say they mention something about wanting to switch out all the soda that they drink, right? At this point, you could say something like, all right, well, you said that substituting unsweetened iced tea for soda at lunch might be a reasonable move for you. Does this seem like something that you could do? Okay, so again, here you're asking a client about how they feel about changing. Is this reasonable? How do they feel about making this change? Then after you do that, then you can move to this idea of scaling so that you can get a better idea of how ready they are to change. And in many ways, this is a way to quantify how ready they are to change. So you can use a ruler of, on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you will be able to drink unsweetened iced tea instead of soda at lunch? And you kind of see a nice visual there. You can actually provide your client a visual and they can circle a number. So this is a nice tool that you can use. We'll practice using this in some of our labs as well. But again, so in order for you to actually see how ready someone is to change, it's important that you follow these steps. So start by using those open-ended questions, then go in and ask about how your client feels about actually making that change, and then maybe even using this scale to really quantify how ready they are to change. So it's also important for us to understand what the term decisional balance is, right? So what this term refers to is as people move through those different stages of the trans-theoretical model, the way they feel about their target behavior will change. So for instance, if a client is in the pre-contemplation stage, there's a good chance they might not have a positive feeling regarding their health behavior change. So for instance, if someone's in pre-contemplation and the change that they are going to make is going to be stopping smoking, they might say, smoking's what I've done my whole life. I've lived my whole life this way. I'm going to die anyways. We may have heard someone use that statement before, right? So it's not a positive statement. But as they move through the different stages of the trans-theoretical model, that feeling, that decisional balance is going to shift to something that's more positive. And that's the goal, right? That should happen as we work through and with our clients. So here are some cognitive processes that might result in a way of new thinking. And so essentially what this is on the left side is you have processes of change, so ways to go about helping your client change. And on the right, you have different descriptions of how to go about doing that. So for example, conscientiousness raising. So in order to do this, you can find and help your client find and learn new facts, ideas, and tips that support their health behavior change. So if we're going to use this example of someone who wants to stop smoking, you can actually help them and maybe provide some information for them to say, hey, have you heard about this local resource? Maybe you can attend it. Here's a website. Give them the tools to learn new information that would support this health behavior change. Another process of change would be dramatic relief. This is where they're experiencing negative emotions because the negative behavior, an example here would be maybe being sedentary or eating fast food, is perceived to be problematic, then feeling relief from deciding to change. So once they realize that whatever behavior they're currently engaging in is problematic, then they can feel relieved when they decide to change. So that's this idea of dramatic relief. A third type of process of change is self-reevaluation. And this is when someone realizes that the behavior change they want to engage in is an important part of their identity as a person. And this is where it's really important that we tie in their values and that you learn and ask about your client's values. Because if something that they value is family and being there for their family, you can tie in this health behavior change to being there with their family. Right? You can start to have this conversation of, in order to have this relationship with their family, in order to live longer so they can be with their family, they need to evaluate and self-evaluate their current behavior so that it aligns with that value. A fourth would be environmental reevaluation. And this is when they realize how the behavior influences the environment, especially the person's social environment. So smoking is a great example, right, we can use here, is when we start to really, and this is what was so powerful and what helped a lot of people quit smoking, was when the knowledge of secondhand smoke came out. So when people who were currently engaging in smoking, right, they were smokers, when it came out that secondhand smoke was actually worse for the loved ones around them who were smoking than it was for the actual smoker, that was one of the main reasons why a lot of people stopped smoking, was this environmental reevaluation. Self-liberation, this is when people decide to change and experience a new belief and the ability to change. So they're liberated in how they're feeling, and so they're going to make that change. Helping relationships. This can be helpful, and this is basically when your client seeks social support to help that behavior change. We use this a lot in physical activity settings, and this is why group fitness is so important. This is why small group training can be so popular, is that when you surround people with those relationships that help that behavior change. Counter conditioning. This is when you substitute a healthy behavior and cognitions for unhealthy behavior, right? So this is a great example. Some people say, okay, I just really need to cut back on my caffeine in the afternoon. And so what you need to realize is that it's not necessarily just removing the caffeine, it's replacing that behavior, because that caffeine was a break for that person in the middle of the work. It was a hot beverage for them to have or a cold beverage for them to have. It was a treat. It was something to kind of help get them through the day. It was more than just caffeine. So the idea behind counter conditioning is saying, okay, we're going to replace this unhealthy behavior with something that is healthier, right? Reinforcement management. This is this idea of increasing rewards for healthy behavior change and decreasing rewards for unhealthy behavior change. That hopefully is pretty intuitive. If someone is rewarding themselves for unhealthy behaviors, I just had a burger, congratulations, you're gonna have a hell of a shake. That's not really positive in their health behaviors, right? So it's increasing rewards for healthy behavior, decreasing rewards for unhealthy behavior. Stimulus control. This is where we are going to remove the reminders and cues to engage in unhealthy behaviors, and then we're going to replace those cues and reminders for healthy behaviors. So we're thinking, well, when would we ever have a cue for a health or an unhealthy behavior, right? That doesn't seem like people would. A great example of this would be if you have pop-up notifications. So pop-up notifications on your phone will tell you if someone has sent you a Snapchat, if someone posted on your wall, if someone sent you a message on Instagram, if someone, or even if you have Netflix, right, on your phone or Hulu, there's a new season or a new episode of your show. All of those triggers are going to basically trigger you to engage in what many people would consider an unhealthy behavior, right? So if you watch your TV show, most likely you're going to do it sitting. If you're on your phone all the time, you're going to be removed from actually being with humans rather than being on your phone. So you can replace some of those cues with healthier cues. For instance, you can add to your planner that you want to work out. Or if we want to use the phone example, we can actually use apps to limit the amount of time on social media, or we can use apps to help people remind themselves to be more physically active and engage in healthy behaviors. And then lastly, social liberation. And this is where you take advantage of opportunities to be with people who model the new behavior, noticing the social norms that reinforce the new behavior. So essentially what this is it's more than just seeking and using social support for health behavior. It's noticing the specific norms that exist within this new group of people. So it's really liberating yourself to a new kind of social network. So let's move on to this idea of self-efficacy. And if you've been in any of my classes before, you've probably heard this term. Self-efficacy is the degree to which an individual believes that they can successfully perform a given behavior. And this was originally described by Bandura in 1977. And self-efficacy is a part of many health behavior change models because it has a strong influence on the effort that an individual will put forth in how they face challenges and difficulties that might arise during their health behavior change. We also know from a scientific perspective that self-efficacy is a really strong predictor of future behavior change. So if you're still kind of curious, I don't really understand what self-efficacy is, think about self-efficacy as situation-specific self-confidence. So you might have a really high self-efficacy in your ability to play basketball, but you might have a really low self-efficacy in your ability to play tennis. So it's situation-specific confidence. So now let's go ahead and think through how self-efficacy is built, right? What goes into building our self-efficacy? Because if you know that self-efficacy is a positive and strong predictor of behavior change, as a coach, you're going to say, well, I want to improve self-efficacy for my client. And there are 4 primary things that go into self-efficacy. The first one is mastery experiences. And this is when people experience successful accomplishment of a skill that they've done. So for instance, if we want our clients to engage in healthier nutrition habits, then what we need to do is give them or help them set smaller goals so that they can actually master those experiences. They can find and experience success, okay? Verbal persuasion is another, and this is essentially persuasive messaging, right? So this is when your client receives persuasive messaging from us as a health coach and potentially other people in this setting, but the message is that the message that you're sending them, this verbal persuasion, needs to be authentic and genuine. Because if you're working with your clients and you say some things that are just, okay, well, you can do it. All right, well, I really believe in you. We can tell from the tone of my voice, right? I'm not making eye contact. It's really not genuine. So this verbal persuasion that's coming from you as a coach needs to be tailored to your client and authentic, okay? Another one is this idea of vicarious learning. And essentially, this is finding motivation from people around you or people around your client that they feel like they can connect with and identify with. So when your client sees people who are similar to themselves being successful at a certain task, they're going to think, well, you know what, maybe I can actually do this as well. And that's a way to increase self-efficacy. So as health coaches, it's important for us to introduce our clients to maybe former clients or friends or colleagues that can help them feel like they belong in that group, like they can see themselves in those individuals. And if those individuals are, achieving success, then they too can achieve success. And then this last piece is this idea of physiological or psychological arousal. And stress arousal is associated with a decrease in self-efficacy. So people are going to interpret stress systems as signs of inability. Health coaches, us, right, we can help our clients reduce stress by creating a relaxing, non-judgmental environment that encourages them to kind of establish this support system and also introduces them to appropriate people around them so that you have this appropriate amount of arousal, okay? So again, important that you know there's 4 components that you can do that go into self-efficacy, and as a health coach, you want to foster those things so that your client can increase their self-efficacy and that health behavior change. So let's stop here on this learning recap. First thing I want you to think about is, what can you say, what tools can you use when determining your client's readiness to change? Second thing is, how would you define self-efficacy? And what are the 4 primary ways that we can develop self-efficacy? Pause here and I'll see you for the next part of this lecture.